normal times, and this additional social worker came at a perfect time. She's able to into many of the classrooms, particularly at Goodwin, and teach lessons. Both of our social workers have an increased load in terms of finding supports for families, for connecting them to resources. So we've been able to do, thankfully, a lot more in that area. All of our teachers, as you know, are participating in the social emotional learning course, which is kind of a silver lining also in terms of this era that we're in, because it has kind of forced us to stop strategies, how to help our students, and it's really equipping all of our teachers with that additional learning. The racial inequity awareness, Sheila can talk about more than I can, but as we know, this is an important time for that, and the work that we have started doing is going to make a huge difference for everybody's social emotional health. And in terms of the trauma-informed practices, each of our faculties engage in pretty regular learning about what to do for our students who are facing many traumas right now, whether it's loss of family members, loss of income in the family, feeling disconnected. So I'm really pleased with all that we're doing in this area, and proud of all that we're doing.
Thanks, Kath. It's important to note that we're preparing students for a variety of experiences. No two students are going to have the same future, obviously, and not all of our students go on to a predictable post-high school experience of a four-year college. Some go on to two-year schools, some go on to trade schools, others join the military. We have others who stay on or go into transition programs, and we have some who go right out into employment. And it's our complex task to prepare them for the future that they've envisioned for themselves, to launch them in a way that allows them to pursue that. And while we were going to look to do a pie chart here to demonstrate how many students go in each direction, first of all, it wouldn't have been particularly remarkable this current year because so many students did go on to college, so that hasn't always been true. But what is remarkable in this past year is the types of different experiences that they went after within the post high school education setting, anything from community colleges, to state colleges, to private schools, to two-year schools. We had two people go into military academies. And so when you think about what we're preparing students of Old Saybrook for, it really is remarkable that each of them can launch and be ready for those different worlds. And that's, again, we're a small school district, and so robust programming is incredibly important to maintain and grow. Thanks, Pam, you can go forward. And it's important to say too that we don't value one more than the other. Those are all important to us. We want to be able to give students AP classes and tech classes and hands-on culinary classes because that is a well-rounded student, and that's what we're hoping to create. I think I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Pendleton at this point.
Thank you. So as Superintendent Pruccio pointed out, the strategic plan that has been in existence over the past 5 years is still alive and well, and certainly has been a consideration in putting this budget together in our very unique year that we're experiencing. So it's a bit of a bridging, if you will, between our current initiatives and moving towards what that new strategic plan that everyone is working on currently might look like. But we know that a lot of these will be continued throughout this next budget process. The goals and challenges of this year, I probably don't even need to mention. I think most of you have experienced them either in your own world at work or your personal world. And so, again, we've used some traditional projections and forecasts, and we've had to use some creative ones because we really have not had the last fiscal year was not a traditional year. And of course, we're building a budget now for a year that we hope is going to be more traditional, but again, we don't know exactly how the plane is going to land yet. So, we're working a bit in a situation where we're trying to bridge the gap and figure out how to together a responsible budget while taking into consideration some of the changes and circumstances that may be in front of us still. And doing that, we have to look at our enrollment, which we've had an updated projection done. We also have created our sustained services budget, which Ms. Puccio will mention and talk about in a little bit as well. We have always in mind looking at ways to save on whatever we're moving forward with, whatever our initiatives are through bidding processes, as well as streamlining the kinds of things that we're doing. We're changing. One of the big areas that Mrs. Listorti will talk about when we get to the particulars on our budget expenditures or projected expenditures are things like textbooks that had a much larger account at one point in time are transitioning to online resources, which is more in the area of software. So you'll see those shifts in some of the things that we have in the budget or have traditionally had in the past are now new traditions and different types of resources. And of course, our best resource or our best way to assess our needs is to work with our practitioners. I listen to what I hear them say that their needs are, what they need in the classroom. They're our best resource. They know what they need to make all these changes happen, and they've been extremely helpful in providing that. Our principals and other administrators as well have really been creative, and so that's all been part of putting the budget together. We always start with a zero base, and I think, Jan, you can speak to that as we move forward.
I'm happy to speak to it now if you like. It's something that as I came up through education, I noticed that it's very easy to create a budget if all you want to do is add for inflation and additional shipping and just continue to do the same thing. But that sort of less energetic way of creating a budget really says it carries through to curriculum and instruction and everything else we do. So we start with a zero-based budget and have people really think about what do I need to achieve the goals we need to achieve, given the students are going to be sitting in front of me next year. That's not only a great fiscal exercise, it's an exciting educational exercise for individuals.
Right, and as we look at the history of our budget, further on in this presentation, I think that becomes very evident. We ask for what we need. We start with, a bottom line at zero, and we build from there. And you'll see the fluctuation in our budgets because needs change from year to year. Always have the fiscal responsibility piece in our forefront when we're building the budget. Do we really need it? What are the most significant needs? We talked a little bit before about enrollment and staffing. Obviously, those get adjusted. And again, you see in our slides on staffing, that we've adjusted as needed based on our enrollment. And I think Mrs. Goss and Mrs. Bai did a great job of talking about the changing educational needs and the models of instruction that we have had to adapt to. Some of them, I'm sure, are going to live with us as we go forward because they've proven to be really, innovative and exciting ways to reach all kids. And so it's given opportunity to really be progressive and create great models for all types of learning and all types of students in meeting their needs. The digital platform of resources has been a change in our environment, but I think, again, really positive things have grown from that. And all of this as a result of the impact of COVID, which, again, we can look at it as the glass half full or the glass half empty. And I think we choose to pick the glass half full because some of the things that we've learned throughout this process have been incredibly helpful and resourceful. And hopefully we will see that students have benefited greatly from being adaptable and being able to meet their needs as we've gone through this wonderful, crazy time. And as you all know, near and dear to my heart is maintaining our facilities and providing clean and safe and healthy environments for all kids to learn and for our staff to be able to come to work every day and do the wonderful things that they're doing.
For this presentation, I'll say the first part, it wasn't half, I think we're more than halfway over. It was really the what we do. The second half is really more about what it costs to do it. And so this gets into the part of the presentation that really is for the money people who want to, our Board of Finance will be interested in this information. What is it that we're asking for and why? And what are we doing with it? So the general statement I'll say here before turning it over to Mrs. Pendleton is we're asking for a very small increase this year. And the why is because 3 of our 4 largest drivers of expenses are actually reduced in this 21-22 budget request. And with that, for the details, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Pendleton.
So you can see here that this represents 88% of our budget. It really is the lion's share of the entire budget. And so it's very easy to deduct from this that while salaries have gone up and not as much as the overall increase in the teacher contract as well as the other bargaining units, the percentage is less than what we have negotiated because staffing has changed and numbers have changed as far as staffing or the number of staff members that we are proposing in this budget. But then, we look at benefits, and we've been very successful with our consortium, and that has really started to prove and weigh out as we've moved through the years. We're hitting our, going into our 5th and 6th, completing our 5th year, going into our 6th, and now we're seeing the fruits of that labor really begin to pay off. And as well as Mrs. Bai and her staff have continually decreased tuition and brought students back and really maintained a very fiscally responsible budget when it comes to tuition placements and the like. And then finally, transportation. We are seeing a decrease there as well because we are consolidating runs and trying to find efficiencies in every possible area we can.
When our pupil expenditure is identified for the school district, parts of what we think about are the expenses to educate children. That's our goal. That's our one major goal, is to educate children and to produce healthy graduates from our school district. Some situations are more expensive than others. Some students' programming is more expensive than others. It's more expensive to educate at the high school level than it is at the elementary level. That's just a fact in most school districts. And some programming is obviously more expensive. Not only are the ones that you see here, but also students with socio-emotional needs, language learners, remediation of any kind, and then also these categories: special education 504, free and reduced lunch. These are students who can require more resources, and it's really imperative that we provide those resources for them. What you see here is the raw numbers and the percentage of the total population over the last 3 years in each of those major categories. And this is our English language learner chart, and we asked Mrs. Goss to confirm for us how many different languages are spoken or represented here, and the answer right now is 9. And they include a variety such as Bosnian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, Vietnamese. What did I miss, Mrs. Goss? There were some other great ones. Tagalog, Mandarin.
I always miss the last one.
I'll find it. I know I wrote it down somewhere. So, but really, we're talking with some of those other ones, some of the more unusual ones for this region. We're talking about 1s and 2s. Really, we're talking about Spanish with some increasing Portuguese as well. This is an interesting story. Remember last year we showed you how many different mandates were flying at us? So I'm watching the legislature as they meet. They're in session, and at this point, bills are being offered up by both the Senate and House side, and they're busy, let me tell you. There's some big nebulous pieces of legislation like supporting students who have been impacted by COVID. And those are obviously placeholder bills that will be fleshed out, but it's the fleshing out that's very interesting because, as you know, you heard us say it before, we often agree with the philosophy and the logic behind the legislation. It's just more often than not comes a mandate without funding for the mandate. I'm hoping that that won't be true. I'm hoping that maybe some of the funding that is coming from the federal government to bring relief from COVID. There's a second round that's supposed to be coming. I'm hoping that it'll get funneled into the right places so that the pieces of legislation and the State Department initiatives really can be funded. As I mentioned in the Budget and Fiscal Committee meeting, Connecticut Association of Public Schools Superintendents has worked for almost 3 years on what is a robust decade and a half financial plan for Old Saybrook, I wish, for state of Connecticut's public schools, charter schools, and magnet schools. We are touting it up in Hartford and hoping that we can get people to see that it's a sensible and less expensive in the long run idea than some of the one-off ideas that tend to become problematic for us to implement and not really seamlessly created so that it can make a long-term significant difference. But what burdens us are mandates, although we had temporary relief from them this year. It's a pandemic, of course. There's just no avoiding talking about it. The executive orders, both federal and state executive orders that came to us, sometimes they cost us money, sometimes they brought us money. But it's been an interesting roller coaster ride. And of course, legislative action, and there was none last year. There was absolutely no legislative action that impacted education that was to any great degree. But I would imagine it looks like we'll address that this year. There'll be plenty. Julie, this is you.
Yes. So this is a representation of the 3 years of the teacher's contract. The first year, obviously, is the present. And so right in the middle there, you can see what Old Saybrook settlement was against the state average. And so those are the salaries that are represented in this proposed budget.
I just want to say before we move on that the reason why we share the teachers group with you every year is obviously that is our largest group. That is a certified group, and so the salaries tend to be higher, and it's a group that goes to binding arbitration. So when we negotiate with this group, we are obviously very much influenced and impacted by the way contracts settle across the state. And that's an important message because not everybody in the community might know that. Thanks, Julie.
So here is our history of teaching positions. And again, we have a net reduction in this budget over the prior year. And adjusted for enrollment and all of the needs that have been proposed. Again, listening to our administrators and what the needs of our students are. And Jan, please chime in if there's something specific you want to highlight.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, as you know, we have tried to share staff and continue to look for ways to share staff outside of the district, but also inside the district. And one of the things that we are at a point that we really need to look carefully at is the schedules of the three schools, particularly the middle school and high school schedules, and bringing them closer together. I talked earlier about the importance of maintaining and growing robust programming for students. And then the second goal of a good schedule would be maintaining staff full-time, because what we don't want to start doing is piecemealing positions and having people working only part-time. We will lose good, talented people. So while we may in the future need to work with fewer staff members, we want, to the degree possible, to make sure that they can be full-time staff members. So that might mean sharing staff between buildings. We do it now. We could do it more seamlessly, and we're going to look at schedules. And as I said to the Budget and Fiscal Committee, that might also mean looking at start times of schools to match them up a little bit more. And there could be a nice opportunity there to address some concerns. But that work is on the table and has begun.
So this slide is our most recent per pupil expenditure that has been audited. And ironically, we fall in the middle, which is where we were last year as well, of these 5 communities that are represented here. But our per pupil actually dropped from last year to this proposed year to $455. So we've actually seen a decline. I think other districts with the declining enrollment have probably experienced a little bit of the same, but we fall right in the middle, and that's kind of where we would expect to be, with Westbrook being a much smaller district, so their per pupil, being less economy of scale for them to work with, and then a larger district like Clinton on the other side of us having a larger enrollment, and so therefore some of the standard types of expenses get dispersed over a larger number, so therefore their per pupils slightly lower.
And I think we said it was about $400 per pupil. Is that right?
$455 per pupil.
That is significant when you look at the total cost for a year-over-year change. Certainly was not the goal of the budget. Again, we asked for what we need. It just happens to work out that way this year.
So while we have one more slide before we get to the expenditures, and it represents our consortium for health insurance. And it looks like, Pam, you're having a little technical difficulty. Oh, there it is.
I had to go to a different screen to unmute myself. So if you can tell me if you can see this at the moment.
We can.
Okay, perfect.
We can. And so this represents sort of a graphic of what the state of Connecticut trend in health insurance is compared to what Old Saybrook's rates have been set under the consortium. And you can see that in the years represented here, there's only been 1 year where we were above trend. And now this year, it looks like our proposed increase will be flat. It will be 0 at this moment in time. That may be adjusted slightly as we move forward. We haven't set those rates yet. However, we're now starting to see that the consortium and all the years of experience and building a standard there with our other 4 towns is starting to pay off. So hopefully that trend continues where we stay below the national and the state trend. That's the goal of this consortium in general. And then this again, as Superintendent Puccio pointed out, we look at our largest group. So this is really the teachers' data. and it's one group within our health insurance. And so we wanted you to see the state plan against our rates. And just to give you a point of reference, the overall plan for just the teachers is about a $65,000 savings from the state plan. So if our teachers were on the state plan, we would be paying slightly more just for that group. And then Ms. Listorti is going to give you the detailed information. These are all interactive, and they have all the expenditures broken down by each of these general categories.
Thank you. These categories are bits and pieces of our accounts payable. So for the most part, are non-personnel related expenditures. And behind each block, we have the opportunity to look at the detailed information. And before I go into the details, I wanted to share with you that this past year, as has been mentioned, there was a different way we needed to look at last year's expenditures. Each area, particularly in the maintenance and facilities area for our buildings, we needed to look at, has the expenditure that we have on record been affected by the closing of schools since March? And in that case, where previously we would look at the historical annual expense and take that as an indicator of what to project moving forward, for certain areas that were definitively affected by the closing of the buildings, we had to determine, are we going to consider this, or are we kind of going to look at that year as an anomaly and not have it influence what we think might happen next year? So with that in mind, we went through several different categories and did analysis of back to fiscal year 2017 actual expenditures through fiscal year 20 actual expenditures. We looked at a 4-year average, we looked at a 3-year average, and then we also looked at our current budget and then developed what we thought would be the best and most accurate number for the proposal for fiscal year 22. In some cases, that meant we were right sizing, whether it be the irrigation system that was added at the middle school while a budget was under development prior to knowing what the actual expenditures would be, and realizing that needed to be right sized, that we did not have sufficient funds in that category for what our actual expenditures were going to be. Conversely, there were some areas that didn't have the level of the expenditures that we had planned for, and we could reduce those. So I will start with a quick look at water, electricity, and natural gas to give you an example of the information that was here. This includes, as we discussed, the addition of irrigation, where we have fiscal year 21 budget of $68,325. We are increasing the proposed to $91,950 for water throughout the district. And a lot of that is largely related to, we had under budgeted for the middle school utilization, keeping in mind that the weather changes continually, whether we have a wet year or a dry year, can also significantly affect whether we need to irrigate as much or not. So in this case, we looked over a broad range of years once the irrigation system was in to determine where we really needed to be. Conversely, our natural gas, we had steady utilization and we could reduce that a bit. And as far as electricity, we had a situation where we had leases or rebates that we had received for installation of upgrading lighting and controls. And with that, we were able to reduce our electricity bills, but at the same time, rates were increasing. So once we evaluated our needs, we determined that that line needed to increase as well. Moving to maintenance and repairs, you can see we had some savings that we could realize in our 430 account, which is general repairs and maintenance. That includes our contracted services. And in keeping up our maintenance and our contracted services, our overall repairs have been mitigated so that we were able to realize or project that we could reduce the request by approximately $35,000. Julie will speak to the capital plan, which is where you see a reduction on the 450 account for construction services. So we were able to realize the savings there as well. I will go through briefly each one. You have the opportunity to review that as well. And if at the end of the presentation you want additional questions, we can address those at that time. Our communications and printing includes our technology leased services, so our copiers, our communication purchase services, which are when we bring speakers into classes, and then advertising and printing services. Although our printing has reduced, we have had some increases in advertising, particularly in trying to recruit staffing, and we use different sources such as Indeed, but we're looking to hold most of those pretty flat. Travel, you will see a significant reduction in 510 transportation. When we bring students back in district for special education, we're also able to realize the savings for the cost of that transportation, and that's a piece of what you see here. Interschool travel, we have some savings, and that has to do with whether it be contractual mileage reimbursement, including when we have teachers who are sharing between buildings. So perhaps if that situation were to change and we had more staffing share between buildings, we might need to adjust the actual number for next year. But that's not something that we can readily determine until we're in the school year itself, when we realize how the staffing will shake out. Professional learning, Director Goss had mentioned our new opportunities for some online learning, which has enabled us to realize a significant savings in professional development, as well as realizing some of those funds are going to be deferred to summer staff compensation after the strategic plan has been determined. We have budgeted for our teachers to have 2 days during the summer where they will be paid to work that strategic plan into curriculum. And conferences and travels, we expect for the next year to continue to see a decreased request for those types of experiences, as I think we're all still a little conservative in our expectations for travel. Property insurance and workers' compensation is staying flat, so that's good news. Classroom, office, and cleaning supplies, a little bit of an increase this year because of the transition to one-to-one devices. Students' Chromebooks are no longer meet the threshold to be considered equipment. They're considered a supply. So where we will have a decrease in technology equipment, there will be somewhat, not a complete offset in supplies. As we were able to add so many devices this year, we would only need to add one class level as we have the seniors leaving. I believe at this point they still have laptops, with the thoughts that those laptops will be taken out of service. The juniors moving up will have their device, and then the incoming students we would need to provide devices for. So it is a reduced cost compared to what we've done this year, but it is something that will increase overall in the supply category. Cleaning supplies and maintenance, we are expecting to continue an increased utilization for cleaning for the foreseeable future, and wanted to make sure we had allowed for that. And our medical supplies are strictly the general ones for the nurses' offices and not the PPE that we've been purchasing for the current pandemic. Gasoline and diesel is pretty flat, so that is good. Software and workbooks, as was mentioned previously, technology licensing has increased significantly as we've moved to more distance learning, but have also provided an opportunity for us to review a wide range of options. We looked at everything we currently have this year. It was reviewed with Director Goss and our technology department, as well as input from our instructional leadership team to see the things that we are using that are working well and that we would like to continue moving forward. And that includes some e-textbooks and resources. So you'll see in the same slide that there is a slight reduction in those textbooks and workbooks, which pretty much leaves math consumable workbooks as our major item to purchase in that area, and the shift towards the technology licensing. Technology equipment, as I had mentioned, you'll see the reduction here. Additionally, we have reduced what we had anticipated for repairs and maintenance. We do have warranties and guarantees for repairs on all the Chromebooks, so we will definitely see a decreased need for repairs that would need to be sent out and not covered under the guarantee. Vehicles and equipment, the large reduction that is noticeable here is for the time being, and I think Jan might speak to this as well. We are not looking to purchase a significant amount of furniture, as we had moved to a model where it was more independent or group work for furniture. And then this year we had to go back to more independent seating, and we had stored what we could, well, the majority of what we had that we would foresee using in the future. And therefore, they're looking to review what our needs will be and take a year and see how things are working before we do any more major furniture purchases.
The only thing I would add to what Mrs. Gordon said is it's time to press pause on this. We've invested in furniture that matches the educational philosophy of the district. And now it's time to see how that all settles out as we implement new technology and new ways of approaching learning, which we learned about in this last year, and how that ends up playing out for furniture. So it's just a pause, and let's wait and see.
Thank you. And last but not least, fairly steady for dues and fees. This is for memberships. It includes curriculum-based memberships as well as district-wide. CABE, Connecticut Center for Learning, I believe, is here. Our membership for that, CAPS, and so on. So that takes care of this slide. Before I move on, are there any questions on this slide in particular?
Pam, it's Karina. I just have a comment. I think the first box that you opened, the one that has construction, just the word construction on the backside, there's a typo. See, it's I just check the spelling on construction. Yeah, there's an extra T right there.
I know I was going to add that too.
I'm trying to pad the budget with an extra T. Thank you very much. I will make sure we get that corrected. Anything else? All right.
All right. So these are the areas within the capital proposed capital budget, and most of them Mrs. Listorti already mentioned. But I will just highlight that the items in which we are looking to include this year is a short list, but an important one. We're going to hopefully do some countertops and cabinets in the Goodwin School Library, which got a little bit of a facelift last year with new carpet and flooring in there. At the middle school and high school, we're going to, have our usual seeding and fertilizing and field maintenance that we do every year, and that represents a little over $40,000. There are some electrical updates and some HVAC repairs. Those would be things like rooftop units, unit ventilators, piping. I mean, this week alone, we've had a couple of crazy things happen. So those are always unanticipated. It's very hard to predict what where we might have a problem or what might not be working properly. And so as our buildings age, those accounts may grow. In fact, I would probably be willing to be a betting woman on that one, that they will grow, because, we're just seeing things age and wear out. And then general facility repairs, those are things that, need to be repaired throughout the course of the year. They can be little things like, a repair to a wall or a window, glass repair, that kind of thing. And so again, we put in an amount so that we can make those repairs should we need to. And then finally, as Ms. Lussorti mentioned, we've purchased most of our classroom furniture. There's a small amount left in there for high school furniture needs. But other than that, there's been a fairly significant decrease in the capital budget.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that before we move on. First of all, I just want to point out to Megan and Joe that it is 8:30, so I know you probably have other things. You're more than welcome to stay, but I wouldn't want to keep you either. I just wanted to point out on the capital, there's a significant decrease, as Mrs. Pendleton said. It's actually about half of what it was last year, and part of it is the scheduling of our 5-year capital plan, but also part of it is that we were closed down last spring and there was no better time to get things done. So between the spring and the summer of this past year, this long stretch of time, which is considered a gift, usually you're rushing projects in July and August, and we took advantage of that time to get some things done. And so things that would typically have been in this budget are not this year.
And I think it's worth noting that that I think we're going to see those numbers climb in future budgets, again, due to the age of our buildings, but also a number of the items that we have in our capital plan scheduled for out years are large ticket items that would probably be more suited for the sinking fund. For instance, the middle school boilers and perhaps a boiler for this building at some point, and Goodwin School. So they're going to be, those are large ticket numbers, $250,000 and upwards. Paving of parking lots. We have a couple parking lots still left to be paved, in the out years. So I just want it to be known that there are some large items, they're not going away. And we've kept our buildings up so well that we want to make sure that these are on the radar for the board as well as the Board of Finance.
Also a good time to point out that in your budget book, on page 63 of 64, it references the sinking fund and some projects that are marked for the sinking fund as well, which is those dollars that are kept on the town side for just this sort of thing, so that we don't get hit with a huge bill that drives a change in our budget in any one year. Next slide, Pam. So the end of the fiscal story that we're telling tonight is that at the end we are looking for really what is tantamount to a zero increase practically. It's a 0.24% increase, $65,000 increase in a almost $27 million budget. And that work was developed, as I said, over the fall. If we did nothing but open up the doors again and didn't carefully look at all of our line items and determine where monies could be saved, where we needed to right size, where we needed to grow things, we would have ended up with a $782,000 increase year over year from this current budget. When the administrators finished their level of work, they were able to drive that dollar amount down and still offer the program we need. And then eventually here at central office, we were able to consolidate, to plug in those numbers for transportation, health benefits, what is really a relatively small increase in salary, and offset it with the capital expenses and come up with this 0.24% increase over the current year. So at the end of the day, it feels like much ado about nothing, because here we are an hour and a half later, and what we're asking for is such a small increase. but we respect the fact that these are taxpayer dollars, and this is what we need this year. We do not need more. This is what we need. And that's a point that we like to make with the Board of Finance and with the community, that we ask for what we need in each year. And we try very hard to be respectful of the fact that these are public funds we use, and it's really important to us that we have the trust of the public and so use their money wisely. This is just a budget history list. Everything, of course, except this year is approved budget. And you can see it has changed a lot. I inherited the 2013-14 budget, and the budgets after that have been the work of this team. And our final slide, this is that interactive slide. I hope you had an opportunity to take a look at it before tonight's meeting. You can click on any of the key boxes, salaries, benefits, and you can get the drop down of the line items and what's in them. And the story here is our budget is primarily salaries, benefits. We are a people business. I know we tell that story every year, but that is the reality. And because 3 of the 4 big ticket items went down this year, our budget is able to come in at such a low increase. And we're proud of that. We're very proud of that. That was never our goal. We did not set out with a certain dollar amount in mind. That's not how we budget either. We budget for what we need. And that's what we present to you this evening, a budget that really represents what Old Saybrook Public Schools needs to move forward next year. I think it's important to say, not so much in this setting, but when we get to larger groups of folks, that this year is unique, and next year may be very different. The number may be very different, but but this is the number we are able to present this year. Our final slide it just brings us back to the philosophical. What is it that we do? The context for our requests. What is it that we do when we engage in this process of asking for funds to run our schools? And this describes it for you. And thank you for your attention to what I know is a long presentation, but a really important story to tell you as you consider your next steps.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Jan and Julie and everyone for your participation in this presentation tonight and all of your hard work. It hours, especially in the level of detail and the excellent job you guys did on the book, especially. That was incredibly helpful. George, I don't know if you have any other comments or kind of closing comments that you'd like to make in regards to the budget before we open it up for questions.
No, I don't. And again, I for all the people who were at Budget Fiscal, I just want to thank all the board members who were there. And this is the second time, and so a lot of time and effort on your part. So I appreciate that. Great discussion at the board, the Budget Fiscal, and again, great discussion taken here. And so I think the consensus from the Budget Fiscal is that this is a very sound and budget, and so I think consensus was that to go forward with it from the Budget Fiscal Committee. Thank you.
Thanks, George. So at this point, I'd like to open up for questions from the board. Does anybody have any questions or comments that you want to make in regards to the budget presentation? Eileen, go ahead.
Fabulous presentation. And I think it's very, it's one that the public really will really understand it well in terms of what we're trying to accomplish and how honest we are, and that there isn't any padding in this budget. And it's, as Jan said, we ask for what we need and we justify with what we need. So maybe that leads me into some questions. That's okay?
Go ahead.
So it just is, I think this is slide 7. It talks about, high school and the different departments. And so question is maybe for Sheila Riffle. It says, beginning with the class of 2022, all students must meet graduation credit requirements in a college and career readiness. So were they not meeting them before? And what are the differences in now?
Well, the specific credit requirement was put in place by the board last spring. So while we've been working towards increasing the number of students who are involved in internship opportunities, attaching some credit to it has really helped, I think, solidify for students the importance of it. I mean, they ultimately deep down know it's important, but for a freshman or a sophomore, it's often hard to think beyond what they're doing next semester. So, our college and career readiness program now involves a series of activities that lend themselves to half of that credit that everyone will do. And then the other half of the credit comes from that personalized nature where students, can work with whether it's a teacher, a group of teachers, our college and career readiness coordinators, specifically a counselor, to develop some personalized opportunities for them to explore different fields outside of, the brick and mortar and really get some hands-on opportunities.
And the 5 early college experiences, is that some acceptances?
Say that again, the early college, those are UConn, those are the ECE courses.
Okay.
Yeah, so every year teachers have an opportunity to apply to UConn or appeal to UConn for offering a course that would allow students to earn credit, dual credit. So they get credit in high school, but also credit on a UConn transcript. So we have 5 ECE classes being taken currently.
5 at UConn.
They're taken at Old Saybrook High School. The teachers have been certified by UConn to be able to teach those courses. So for instance, physics, we call it 1201 and 1202 because that's what UConn calls it. So if students get a C or better in our physics class with our certified teacher, then they also get that 3 credit equivalent on a transcript that they can transfer to most other colleges if they choose not to go to UConn.
Thanks so much. I think, and Jen had also mentioned it, that for many years, people would look at our high school and think, well, it's a small high school. But we always, as a board, really felt that regardless of the numbers, it needed to be a comprehensive high school. And so with that understanding, when you see this list of challenges and also experiences, I think it's valuable when you put the arts down, because it really takes a look at what we're all about, which is personalization. And the fact that you added art, chorus and band, and then art, so it really creates a very well-rounded student.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah, the other question I have is probably for social emotional wellness and about the social worker. So is the social worker, any of them bilingual?
Actually, one of them is. Yeah, the one at Goodwin is bilingual.
And do they separate, Kathy? And do they separate them? How do you separate them through the district? Are they assigned to a school or?
So right now we have 2 social workers, and so we have 0.8 at Goodwin, 0.8 at the high school, and 0.4 at the middle school.
I think this is a good time for us to mention again that while we have an overall reduction in staffing, we do have built into the 21-22 budget a request for an additional social worker.
Important. And just lastly, the racial and equity awareness at Old Saybrook High School. What a year to be doing that besides the pandemic, Black Lives Matter and many other things. So is that right now just an initiative going on at the high school or operating, just based on some of the situations that we're looking at, just in terms of what we're offering for curriculum, and that's part of the budget, but still.
I can speak for the high school. I certainly know that it's a conversation that has been had district-wide. In terms of the work, we're kind of building it as we go. We've started with some training and exploration opportunities with our faculty. Our next step is to add students to that mix. We have a group of students who have reached out and said, I want to be a part of whatever we do going forward. So, I know that I don't want to speak for Jan and the other schools, obviously, but I know that there is a need. We've recognized a need and there's interest across the board. It's just figuring out age appropriate, types of ways to explore what is available to help educate and reflect.
And are they looking a little bit, Sheila, into the social studies curriculum? In terms, I just heard something on public radio all about that from on a college level about how they need to really take a look at what we're teaching kids.
Yeah, we have some teachers attending an 8-workshop series on culturally responsive education. Joe and I are also attending a separate. I think there's teachers actually at every building doing that. Is that correct, Anthony? Yeah. So I think that involves certainly a close-up lens on social studies curriculum, but more importantly, a close-up lens on curricula across the board. We do have our Latino Studies and African American Studies course that is, we had no students signed up for it for first semester. So we moved both courses to second semester, and now we have some students jumping on board. So that's a piece that, while ultimately it certainly shouldn't have to be separate, we're following a state mandate in that regard. And, teachers in the social studies department at the high school, I know, are continue to develop different opportunities for students to choose how they'd like to explore our history from a socially charged lens, if you will. And that work will continue.
Thanks so much. I know the district is looking at a complete assessment of diversity. Thanks so much, Sheila. I appreciate it. And Kathy.
Sure.
So are there questions or comments in regards to the budget presentation? Go ahead, Jan.
Chair, I just want to commend Jan and the team. I obviously you did yeoman's work. I think it's an excellent budget. I think the presentation was thorough. The book is well done, and I'm ready to say I would recommend that we adopt it and move forward. Let the administration move forward to the Board of Finance.
Thanks, Jan. I appreciate your comments. Other comments or questions from the board? All right, so, Jan Furman provides us a good segue. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, we have the opportunity tonight as a board to move to adopt this budget as the board's budget and move it forward to the Board of Finance. And so if the board feels that you're ready to do that, I'd look for a motion to move this budget forward. Otherwise, as I said before, we could certainly pause and give everybody a chance. If they feel like they need more time, we could move it to a special meeting to continue a discussion if the board feels that's necessary. So I'll open it up at this point if anybody wants to make a motion to adopt this budget and move the budget forward.
I'll make a motion to move the budget forward.
All right, so we have a motion from Eileen, and it looks like a second from Jan Furman. Any further discussion? All right, so all in favor, a show of hands, and aye to move the budget forward. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it looked like that was unanimous. So moved.
If I could just say a few words of thanks, first of all, to the board, especially those folks on the budget and fiscal committee who diligently sat through this twice and were so supportive. Thank you very much for moving this forward tonight. I think it's great that we're going to get in front of the Board of Finance early while everyone is still fresh, if there is such a thing at this time of year. And in this year. And I, of course, want to thank the administrators, particularly Julie Pendleton, Pamela Storty, and everybody you see here. You just really work very hard to put a very careful plan together for all of you.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much. And thank you again, George. Go ahead if you got a comment.
No, again, thank you for everybody again, but I just want to make a couple comments now that this budget is going to the Board of Finance. If I can just make two comments for the Board of Finance presentation. One, I think just sort of following up on Eileen's comment, that, at some point these slides will become slow slides. And so her question about the wording in the college and career readiness of the high school, it could, if you don't have the context, it could come across a little bit negative, or it just seems like until now we didn't do it, right? And this is the font, the small print that says beginning with the class of 2022, all students must meet, right? And so the if you don't have the context, it does come across as the indication that prior to this, we didn't do something right? And so it has a negative connotation or negative meaning, and that's certainly not the intent. And so maybe it's just a change of wording because, these slides have a life of their own outside and people don't read it, they can interpret it incorrectly. That's just one comment. And I think Eileen's question essentially had some confusion there, right? So.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and I was going to jump in and say this earlier, if those are amended, we had a requirement for a school to career opportunities, but not this formal and not this grand. We've been building those. So we can talk about those in the context of the strategic plan and how they have become more grand to reflect the philosophies and the goals of the plan. A little bit derailed last year, obviously, and that gave us an opportunity to rebuild. So we can find a way to change up the language on that slide just a little bit and then speak to it.
I'm gonna do this on the fly, right? But even just say something like beginning with the class of 2022, students will, as you said, right, there's an enhanced readiness, and so students will meet an enhanced graduation readiness, right? So it has a connotation of it's a bigger and better improved, something different before, right? So yeah, it's just a simple one or two word addition. I think it's all that's necessary. And if I make the other comment I have is this book here. I think that this is the budget book, right? And I suspect that the Board of Finance will get something very close to this. And again, Pam did a fantastic job in terms of addressing all the components with the major changes. And in the past, in the Board of Finance, what I've noticed is that they seem to focus in on all the line items that have at least digits on the plus side. They never seem to care about the ones that go down by double digits on the negative side. And so I think Pam's done a great job in terms of addressing all of those. The only one that I thought that was missed was the retirement. This is page 55 of the book. And then the retirement, I think it's account number 230, and it's up 13.7%. And, there's just a question. Just in terms of just being ready for, if there was a question, why is retirement going up? Right. So, I'm sure there's a reason, and it's just, and if you guys have thought about it, then the reason will be there. So that's the only comment I have.
Actually, the town gives us the number and they significantly increased our contribution. So,
From
that's the portion.
8.75 to 11%.
So then,
Right.
push it back at them then.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's a great one, George.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's actually, it's a great clarification, actually, that's it's a contribution as opposed to an expense, so I think that's great. Actually, it was a good catch, George. I didn't catch that one. So that was a good one.
A town mandated contribution, I might add.
Okay.
We don't really have any say.
Thank you.
I just have a question about process.
Sure.
I know that with the last, the governor said that the budget could be approved, I think, by the Board of Finance. What does the process look like after the presentation next Tuesday is really my question.
Typically, sometime in March, the first selectman moves us to the steps that we take to go to the public hearing and then to the full vote. But good question, Karina. I don't know how that will be different this year, if the executive order will still allow a somewhat different process. I don't know if that's one of the executive orders that's being renewed, or if they'll let that one die. There's so many questions that are still unanswered about executive orders and even the emergency status, which is supposed to end in February. Good question. I will continue to watch that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Karina. All right, so any further questions or comments before we move on to our next agenda item? All right, then. Eileen, do you have a question? I think you're on mute.
On that retirement line, I don't mean to, prolong the meeting, but there's all these numbers, so maybe I can talk to you about it later because I'm not quite sure what they will mean.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Eileen. All right, so at this point, the board's going to look to go into executive session, and just, from a housekeeping perspective, those of you who won't be joining us in executive session, you'll need to drop. And so at this point, I'm going to look for a motion to enter executive session to discuss a collective bargaining agreement, inviting in Superintendent Peruccio and Julie Pendleton. Can I get a motion for that, please? So moved by Alan and seconded, looks like, by Jan Furman. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved, and let's give Trent a second to get us set up. And thank you, Sheila and Krista and everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We genuinely appreciate having you guys along.
Thank you so much for your support, everyone.
Thanks. We're good, okay. So it is 9:16 p.m. and we're going to come out of executive session. And I would look to the board for a motion to accept the collective bargaining agreement as presented.
So I'll just expand on that a little bit,
Please.
Tara. So you move to approve the tentative agreement between the OS School Custodians Union and the Old Saybrook Board of Education as presented.
Excellent, thank you, Karen. And do we have a second for that? Jim, is that you seconding the up? Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It didn't cost us a nickel in legal fees.
Yeah.
Just want to say that.
So that right there is an excellent thing too. Thank you all, and thank our partners on the custodial staff as well for their generous negotiations. All right, so at this point, just some quick reminders. So the Board of Finance presentation meeting, Jan, is the 19th, I believe, which is a week from today.
Yes,
Fair enough. We do have a budget and fiscal committee meeting scheduled for the 26th, which I don't believe we'll need at this point. And then our next regular meeting is on January 26th at 7 p.m. And with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Eileen, seconded by Karina. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. Thank you. Thank you all for your participation tonight, and thank you so much for coming to the meeting so prepared to discuss our budget. I genuinely appreciate it. The swift approval of that was appreciated.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
everybody.
guys. Good night. See you all soon.
Great job, everyone.